Hi AP. Okay, in today's video we're going to talk about strategies for harmonizing melodies. This is the free response question number 7 on the AP theory exam. So here are some strategies. First off, you're going to be given a key, but keep in mind that this part of the exam is timed, so if you must, and only must, then you should write out the chord stack for the following chords: the 1 chord, the 2 chord or the 2/7 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 or 5/7 chord, and then the 6 chord. Okay, the key will be either major or minor. Also, you're going to want to identify the cadences and work them first, and you'll see the cadences appear near the fermatas. Also, you want to identify possible chord choices and start phrases with tonic, if possible. Determine what harmonic rhythm you will use. This means that you get to decide which notes will harmonize and which notes are not part of the harmony, like some non-chord tones that may exist. Make your selection of the chord and the inversion keeping in mind standard chord progressions. A standard chord progression is something like tonic going to subdominant, dominant, and then back to tonic. Also, keep in mind that contrary motion against the bass is always a great idea. And keep in mind that creating a bass line should be consonant counterpoint to the melody. That word consonant we talked about last year. Those are your intervals of 3, 6, 5, things like that. Also, check your work to look for parallelism, retrogression, more on that later, and correct resolution of tendency tones if they are in the bass. For example, if you have a 5/4/2, it must resolve to a 1/6. Sing the song and you can't go wrong. 5/4/2 indicates that fa is in the bass. It's third inversion. So fa must go to mi of the 1 chord. Keep in mind that you want to use the KISS method. That is, keep it simple for success. By the way, it's not necessary to use the 3 chord or the 7 diminished or 7 diminished 7th chord. That's why if you go back to the first bullet, if you have to write out your chord stack, you should write out the chords for the 1, the 2, the 4, the 5, and the 6. All right, let's proceed on. Pause this video at any time if you feel the need to copy down some notes. Okay, so more on strategies for harmonizing a melody. Here are some tips for writing cadences, which remember you're going to want to work first. Use only the major or the minor 1, depending on if it's a major key or a minor key. Use only the minor 6 or the major 6th, or the major 5 as the last chord of a cadence. I'll repeat. Use only the 1 chord, the 6 chord, or the 5 chord as the last chord of a cadence. In other words, at the fermatas. Do not invert the cadence. Next, write a perfect authentic cadence for the last cadence, that is the final fermata. Also, for cadences, look at the fermatas and see if there's a chromatic note. In other words, a note that's not diatonic near the cadence. If there is, look for the accidental and the note it leads to. The accidental is usually a leading tone in a new key, and the note the accidental leads to is the new tonic. So in other words, if you see an accidental that's not part of the key, we're dealing with a secondary dominant chord, where you're going to have, for example, a 5 of 5. Okay, so we want to memorize these common melodic endings. These are melodic endings. I'm going to circle the word endings. You want to harmonize them with the norm for all cadences. So let's take a look at what we have. We have the first example in F major. We have the second example in F minor. And we have the third example in F major. And I'm going to grab my red pen for this because what I want to do now, first and foremost, is just write the solfege of the soprano, just so I know. So F major, we're looking at mi, re, do. F minor, we're looking at do, ti, do. That's a raised leading tone, but it's diatonic, okay? It's not a secondary dominant. It just means that we're using the harmonic minor form. Instead of E flat, it's E natural. So that's do, ti, do. And in the last example, I have do, re, do. Okay, listen carefully. If the final cadence melody ends with mi, re, do, like the first measure, or do, ti, do, like the second measure, or do, re, do, as in the third measure, then harmonize with sol, sol, do. In the bass. In other words, 1-6-4, or in minor, 1-6-4, 5, or you could even do 5-7 if you wanted to, and then 1. Major or minor. Let me repeat. If the final cadence melody ends with mi, re, do in the soprano, do, ti, do in the soprano, or do, re, do in the soprano, then harmonize in the bass sol, sol, do, meaning the chord progression is a cadential 6-4. That is to say 1-6-4, 5 or 5-7 to 1. Remember, this is a cadential 6-4, so the 1-6-4 must be on a strong beat, followed by the 5 or the 5-7 on a weak beat. Cadential 6-4 chords are only on strong beats. So, in the first measure, I see mi, re, do in the soprano. I've memorized that when I see mi, re, do in the soprano, that I can do this in the bass. Sol, sol, do. Gonna want to make that a half note, follow the same rhythm as the soprano. Stems down. You're only notating for this question the bass and the soprano. Then we can add in our Roman numerals. This is a major key, so I need a capital 1-6-4. That's a cadential 6-4. It's going to be on a strong beat, so that works. To the 5, to the 1. If I wanted to, I can put the 7 here. Doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot because I don't have to write the alto or the tenor voices. That's all I need to do. Okay, let's look at the second measure, this melodic ending. We're in a minor key. This is F minor. We have a raised leading tone. The soprano is singing do, ti, do. I have memorized that when I see do, ti, do in the soprano, that I can use sol, sol, do, make it a half note, in the bass. Now I would have a 1-6-4 on a strong beat, the cadential 6-4, to the 5, which is major. I'm going to put a 7 in parentheses if you so desire, to the minor 1. The 5 chord is major because we have a raised leading tone. Okay, moving on to the third measure. This is a very common melodic ending as well, where in F major, the soprano is singing do, re, do. We can again use our cadential 6/4 when we see do, re, do. Cadential 6/4 in the bass is going to be sol, sol, do. Make it a half note. Then supply your Roman numeral analysis. Don't forget your Arabic numerals. Major key, so it's capital 1, 6/4, followed by the 5, or the 5/7, to major 1. If you can memorize these three patterns of the soprano, mi, re, do, ti, do, re, do, and then the bass would all be sol, sol, do for each of those patterns. So those are the most common melodic endings. And you also notice that in each case, we've created a perfect authentic cadence because the bass is going from sol to do and the soprano ends on do. Both factors are present. Let's move on. Okay, now we have to memorize some more common melodic endings, okay? And you should know that on the last frame, the sol, sol, do in the bass, sol, sol, do is the most common bass ending. And that is a fact. Another fact, the bass that we're going to create right now is the second most common bass ending. And it's when you see these patterns in the soprano. So let's take a look at these examples. The first measure is just like the previous frame, F major. Second measure, F minor. Third measure, F major. Notice we have different tones though in the soprano. So let's identify the solfege. That would help. So first measure, we're looking at re, ti, do for soprano. Second measure, we're looking at fa, ti, do. There's an accidental there, but again, that's the E natural, which is just the leading tone in F minor. It's considered diatonic. And the last measure, do, ti, do. Okay, listen carefully. If the melody of the final cadence ends with re, ti, do, as in the first measure, or possibly fa, ti, do in the second measure, or do, ti, do in the third measure, then harmonize with fa, sol, do in the bass. The chord progression would be 2-6 to 5 to 1, or 4 to 5 to 1. So, let me repeat. If the soprano pattern for the final cadence ends with re, ti, do, or fa, ti, do, or do, ti, do, then harmonize the bass with fa, sol, do. And I'm going to do that now. And you can as well. Fa, sol, do. Make that a half note. So we've done that for the first measure. What would the Roman numeral analysis be? And do not forget any Arabic numerals that you may need. We're looking at a 2-6 to a 5, or a 5-7 to a 1. Here's a special note. We love to write the 2 chord in first inversion. I wouldn't write the 2 chord otherwise for harmonizing a melody. Make it a 2/6. And in this case it works because the implied chord in F major, the 2 chord is G, B flat, D. So a B flat is in the bass, so it's going to be a first inversion. 2/6, 5, 1. In the second measure, we see the soprano singing Fa, Ti, Do. Memorize that when we see Fa, Ti, Do, the bass can do Fa, Sol, Do. Same bass pattern. And we can do the 2/6 again, the 5/7, 2, this is minor. Make sure your Roman numerals indicate that. There's something missing from the second measure, Roman numeral analysis. Any guesses? Well, remember that in minor keys, the 2 chord is diminished. So I'm going to need to put my circle right there. That's a 2 diminished 6 to a 5 or 5/7. That's major because of the leading tone E natural that we raised from E flat, going to the minor 1. Think about the spelling of this chord for a minute, this 2 diminished 6th. So we have a G, B flat, D flat. That makes it diminished. So you don't want to forget the symbol there for the diminished sign. Okay, third measure, back to major. Memorize that when we have Do, Ti, Do in the soprano. The second most common bass line is Fa, Sol, Do. Then analyze with Roman numerals. That would be the 4, which loves to go to 5, which loves to go to 1, all major. I can't have the 2 chord as the first chord in that example because the F is in the soprano. And F is part of the 4 chord. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat before we continue on. If the melody ends, the final cadence that is, with Re, Ti, Do, or Fa, Ti, Do, or even Do, Ti, Do, then harmonize the bass line as Fa, Sol, Do. And the chord progression will be 2/6 to 5 to 1, or 4 to 5 to 1. And if you're in minor, don't forget it's 2 diminished 6 to 5 to 1. What we have here are perfect authentic cadences in all 3 examples. We're not dealing with any cadential 6/4 because there's no 6/4 chords, there's no chords in second inversion, but recall that your final cadence should be a PAC, and here we have PACs in all 3 measures because soprano ends on Do and the bass motion is Sol to Do between the last 2 chords. Let's continue on. Let's talk about half cadences. Okay, by the way, whenever you see FR, that means free response. So this is free response question 7. So when we talk about half cadences, in the free response question 7, there will be at least one cadence that will be a half cadence. Okay, it will end the phrase with a Sol, a Ti, or a Re. That's the spelling of the 5 chord. So if the melody ends with T, which is the 7th scale degree, or re, the second scale degree, your only choice is a half cadence. Sol could be a half cadence or an imperfect authentic cadence, because Sol, the fifth scale degree, is a common tone that exists in the tonic chord as well as the dominant chord. So if you harmonize as a half cadence, then you're going to want to write a root position 5. What comes before 5? Well, the same 3 chords that came before 5 in the perfect authentic cadence examples we did previously. Either a 1-6-4 or that 2 chord in first inversion, the 2-6, or the 4 chord. If you use the 2 chord, make it a 2-6 for first inversion. You can harmonize re, fa, or la in the melody with fa in the bass and 4 or 2-6. You can harmonize do, mi, or sol in the melody with sol in the bass and 1-6-4. Then there's the Phrygian half cadence, which has a progression of minor 4-6 to 5. Phrygian half, recall, only occurs in minor. The bass line must be lay, sol, that half step motion, and the melody is commonly fa, sol. Okay, so let's take a look at these half cadences that we have here. There are 5 examples, 3 of which are in F major, 2 of which are in F minor. Let's look at the first one. So we have the soprano singing re, ti. We can look at the second example, and we have the soprano, and this is F minor, so we have the soprano singing re. I'm going to put mi in parentheses. Why do you suppose that A flat is circled? Well, hopefully you thought of that as a non-chord tone. It's just a passing tone. Fa up to sol. That's actually re, me. And then fa to sol. In the third example, we're back to F major, and I have the solfege of the soprano doing mi to re. In the fourth example, I have F major, and I have la to sol. In the fifth example, we're in F minor. This looks like it's our Phrygian cadence. Can you see the lay sol in the bass line? And the soprano is singing fa to sol. Okay, now that I have my solfege in, we can look at the last chord in each example, and we can see that we have it either as sol, ti, or re, which is a good indicator that a half cadence should be placed there. So going back to the first example, we have re, ti. Re is G in the key of F major, so you can think of your chord stack and what might work. The 4 chord would not work there because G is not in the 4 chord of F major. But there's that 2-6 again to save the day. So 2-6 loves to go to 5. Remember the 4-7-3-6-2-5-1? That works really nicely. Let's look at the end. The last one, we're in F minor. So this is my Phrygian cadence. When I have, you can memorize this, when I have the soprano going from fa to sol in minor, the bass can go in contrary motion, lay sol, making it the minor 4-6 to the 5. In the fourth example, we're in F major. I have La Sol, that's D to C. You can think of what Roman numerals, what chords would work well with the D, or what exist where the D exists. The D in the key of F exists in the 4 chord, so we have a 4 to a 5, making a great half cadence right there. Note the contrary motion too of the bass against the soprano. In the middle example, the third example, we have some oblique motion. We actually have a 6/4 chord. What type of 6/4 chord is that? Hopefully you said pedal 6/4 because the bass is staying on Sol. And that's allowed. It's 1 6/4 to 5. That's a correct use of a pedal 6/4. The soprano is singing Mi down to Re, making a nice half cadence. And then we have the second example with the non-chord tone. Now, here's a question for you. One of these examples is not correct. Can you figure out which one it is and why? Okay, here is the answer. Number 2. I'll explain. Here's where you must be careful not to write parallel octaves between the bass and the soprano. So if the melody is Fa Sol, it does indeed imply 2 diminished 6 to 5 or 4 to 5. However, do not write the same thing in the bass that is in the soprano. The second example creates parallel octaves, B flat to C, even though the passing tone moves the B flat to beat 2. It is still parallel octaves, and it's considered to be an egregious error. So be really, really careful with that. And that's why motion like oblique and contrary is the best type of motion. Here's some more on half cadences. If 2 cadences both end with Sol, which is the 5th scale degree, both cadences could be a half cadence, or one could be a half cadence, and one could be an imperfect authentic cadence. If the melody, in this case at the cadence, ends with Sol and is preceded by Fi, and we know Fi to be the raised 4th scale degree, then harmonize Fi with root position 5 of 5 and Sol with root position 5. That's very wordy, but in other words, when you see Fi, you're thinking secondary dominant. When you see that, it's a 5 of 5 root position going to Sol in the bass, which is root position 5. So here are some examples to illustrate what we just described. The first one is in F major. F major, and we see the second chord. We have a non-diatonic tone. That's the B natural. B natural is not in the key of F major, so there's our secondary dominant. Think of the B natural as the leading tone. What does it lead to? It leads to C. So C is our new temporary tonic. You could think of it that way. We would write the Roman numeral analysis to be a 5 of 5 going to a 5, all in root position. In the second example, it's very similar, only we're in a minor key, F minor. We have a minor 1 chord. Then we have Fi, which is a B natural, not part of F minor. Therefore, it's a secondary dominant. Think of that as the leading tone to the new key. B natural is the leading tone in the key of C. So C is our temporary tonic. And the second chord, where Fi is our secondary dominant. That's a 5 of 5 going to the 5 chord in F minor. Everything is in root position. Now, in the third example, let's read what's in the box at the bottom. In this example, we wrote the 5 of 5 in first inversion, because you see the 5, 6, 5 there. So in other words, the non-diatonic tone is in the bass, so that the altered note is in the bass. Note that what was given in the soprano is the 7th of the chord. The chord is G, B, D, F. So F is the 7th. And it resolves down by step. Very important, you want to remember to always resolve the 7th chord, the 7th of a 7th chord down by a step. So what's the lesson of this example? The given melody must be appropriate for the correct resolution of the 7th in order to harmonize it this way. But remember our KISS method. Keep it simple for success, right? And in the last example, we have F major. We have added a D flat in the bass, and the soprano is singing Do up to Re. This is a Phrygian half cadence. D flat in the key of F major is a flat 6, which is lay. Lay can go to sol, making it a minor 4/6 to a 5, a Phrygian half cadence. Feel free to pause the video and absorb all this information as needed. Let's roll. Now we're on to deceptive cadences. Deceptive cadences, you know, are major 5 to a minor 6. That is, if we're in a major key, or if we're in a minor key, using a harmonic, we're using a major 5 to a major 6. So, question, what pitches in the melody would imply a deceptive cadence? Think about it. Do would, and Mi would. The first and third scale degrees would imply a deceptive cadence. Why not La? Because with La in the soprano and La in the bass, you would have parallel octaves. If the phrase end is Mi or Sol, you have some choices. You could supply a perfect authentic cadence or a deceptive cadence. If you choose to harmonize with a deceptive cadence, then the 2 chord progression should be root position 5 to 6. What comes before 5? Well, we've already established that previously. The predominant harmonies, 2, 6, or 4, or the 1, 6, 4 if it's on a strong beat. So I'm going to go and write my solfege for the first example in F major. We have the soprano, which is in F major, the D is La. So we're going La, Sol, Fa, that's a non-chord tone, to Mi. In the second example, F major, we have Mi, Re, Do. And in the third example, we have F minor, we have Do, raised 7th, Ti, back to Do. And in the last example, F minor, we have Sol, down to Fa, down to Me. It's important to realize that you don't want to end your last cadence, the very final cadence, with deceptive cadence. That we're going to reserve for the perfect authentic cadence, as we mentioned earlier. Deceptive cadences can occur at one of the other cadence points in the free response question. So let's take a look here, and you see how we've harmonized that melody in the first example. There's our 2/6 chord again. Remember, we want to use the 2 chord in first inversion. It works really well, and it loves to go to 5. So we have 2-6 to 5, or 5-7. You could write it as 5-8-7, implying the suspension that we have there, to the minor 6 chord. Make sure you accurately provide the quality of the Roman numeral. If it's minor, lowercase. Don't forget your Arabic numerals as well, especially if you're doing 2-6. You don't want to leave it as just a 2. In the second example, we have F major, mi, re, do. This is a great spot to have a cadential 6-4. It occurs in a strong beat. There's our 1-6-4 to our 5. And instead of going to the tonic 1, which we could have done, we made it more interesting. And we've gone to the minor 6. Again, this is occurring at one of the other cadence points other than the ending, the final one. And then we have the third example in F minor, do, ti, do. That's the minor 4 to the 5 to the major 6. Do you see those parallel tenths? I do. If we actually had to supply the alto and tenor voicing for this and do some voice leading, we would recall that we would have to do irregular doubling on the minor 6 to avoid the interval of an augmented second. But we don't have to do that with this question, thankfully. Okay, in the last example, we're in F minor. Soprano is going sol to fa down to me. We could have made it a 1 chord, but we made it deceptive, which is great. And again, another example of a cadential 6-4 in minor. Minor 1-6-4 to the 5-7 to the minor 6. These are some great chord progressions. Okay. Plagal. Plagal cadences. We have the major 4 to the major 1, or the minor 4 to the minor 1. What pitches in the melody would imply a plagal cadence? Well, if you see fa, la, or do, which is really the 4 chord, right? Scale degree 4, 6, and 1, 8 or 1, depending on how you want to look at it, going to do, mi, or sol, the 1 chord. What melodic endings usually produce a plagal cadence? You have fa down to mi, or fa down to me if it's in minor, or you can have la to sol, or lay to sol if it's minor. So you can harmonize both of these phrase endings with the root position 4-1. Plagal's easy. So there's fa down to mi, la down to sol, and lay down to sol. Each one of these, root position, keep it as a root all the way throughout. And this is your amen cadence. So AP, in our next video, we're going to talk about tips for harmonizing the beginning of phrases. In this video, we talked about harmonizing the ending. Okay, and I'm going to leave you with this page so you can reread it just to double check everything and make sure you fully understand it. If you have any questions about it, I'm available anytime. Thanks for watching, AP. Make it a great day.